It's Tuesday, November 21st. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is Andy Behrens himself. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm actually I'm kind of excited about this episode because we're going to be talking about a handful of names that I am personally a little bit panicked about. I don't think I'm as skittish as some of the listeners necessarily, but I think they hit on some I think they hit on some pretty fair names this week. I've been scrolling through the document here, and they're not as wrong as they were last week. I'll say that.
No, honestly, I would say this is some of the best work of the people.
Yeah.
So far, this is some of the best work in terms of the submissions. We will have to, maybe set some guidelines here about whether the people are allowed to just try to move folks right into the coping corner, because we got at least 3 submissions for people listeners trying to put people in the coping corner. I'm not sure if Andy, you are the judge. Judge Andy Behrens is the presiding legal authority here at Yahoo Fantasy. I guess this is kind of on you, pal, whether to decide whether the people have the authority to just try to move guys into the coping corner.
I mean, the coping corner, which also known as, I thought we rebranded it Pollard's Playground, which is fantastic. Again, tip of the hat to whoever came up with Pollard's Playground. It's marvelous. But the whole point there was supposed to be, that was like our domain where we just said, okay, enough. We're talking about that. We're talking the same player in circles every week. It's not necessarily getting better, and you're just going to have to deal. And we shove them in a dark place, and we don't have to talk about him again. But that was our tool. That wasn't the people's tool.
Yeah, especially because there's a few coping corner submissions here that the people jumped the gun a little bit on trying to put some folks in the coping corner. And that's
the other thing. It has to be a name that we've talked about repeatedly,
yes,
like on the show. You can't just bypass panic and go straight to coping.
Right, correct. And we will discuss that when we get to some of your submissions for the coping corner / the people's panic meter. Before we get into all of it, though, I do want to note our schedule for this week, because it's Thanksgiving week. Oh God, Andy, every single year, I forget how rushed the week of Thanksgiving feels from a content perspective and a real life perspective. We're hosting multiple events here at the new Harmon house, and I'm a ball of stress. Okay. So with that noted, we are having this show as scheduled Tuesday. You're listening to this right now, so you didn't really need me to tell you that, but this show is going on as scheduled. There is no Eckler's Edge this week. So we will not hear from Austin. I'm sure he's happy to be taking a break from being in front of a microphone after the way the last game went, although they play the Ravens in week 12. So we'll see how that goes. So no Eckler's Edge this week. So Dalton will join me tomorrow for a stat nerd / viewer's guide sort of combination. And that will be our final episode for the week, because your boy needs to not think about this podcast for a little bit. I love you all. I love all of you out there. I love Andy. I love producer Colin. All the hosts. I love the listeners. You need to take a little break from the pod. So post the preview episode, you won't hear from us again until Scott and I are recapping all of the Week 12 games on Sunday night as scheduled. So that is our Thanksgiving week schedule. Without any further ado, let's get into it. The post Week 11, the People's Panic Meter. You guys know how to submit to the mailbag, fantasy mailbag at yahoosports.com. Videos, audio. We have some good ones this week. Those are encouraged, but just shoot us a line. You can tweet at us as well. A few people unprompted, Andy, actually just tweeted at us this week, which was pretty cool to see. Didn't just follow up on my posts. Oh, no. Hey, I'm freaking out about this. And Andy does a good job of flagging those. So that's great to see. But let's talk coping corner here. So far, there are a few players in the coping corner, and honestly, I feel good about all of them. Including the namesake Tony Pollard, Pollard's Playground. Obviously, he scored a touchdown. Don't care. He is still in the coping corner. Ramondre Stevenson, Christian Watson, Dameon Pierce, and the entire Falcons offense. Man, it felt so good to not to think about the Falcons when they were on their bye this past week. That is the members of the coping corner. We do have one user submission to the coping corner this week, Andy, but I want to hear who your name is first for this week's coping corner segment before we address the user submission.
Well, how do you feel about putting somebody in the coping corner off of a legit good game? Is that fair? Can we do that? Can we put someone in there on a high note instead of oh man, it's his third terrible game in a row and everybody's complaining, but the complaints aren't new. I kind of want to retire Trevor Lawrence now. Like I want to just put him in there off of the best fantasy game that he is going to have this year.
Wait, why?
Why? I see you ready to jump because I feel like this is absolutely the high watermark. I actually think that it was not his best like real life game. I'm sure that there are some throws that he would like back that were just misfires, especially like first half of that game. But he gives us 2 rushing scores to go with 2 passing scores. It was, I feel like, exactly what we talked about with Calvin Ridley last week, where maybe this guy's just going to be a matchup play. Because the matchup was great. He crushed it, and it's not going to be like that every week. Like I feel like it. I don't know. I feel like it's only going to get worse from here, right? Like we probably just saw the best moment from both of these players. Again, I think they have certainly played well. I really think that Trevor Lawrence has played well. Again, I think he's played many games better than the Tennessee game. It's just going to end up being his best fantasy performance. And I'm not looking forward to the people turning on him again in December, which I feel they will.
Yeah, I mean, he does in back-to-back weeks 14 and weeks 15, get the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens.
It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, that is really unfortunate. I mean, guarantee. Let me give you this lock of the week here prediction. December 11th, Andy and I are going to be recording the post-week 14 People's Panic Meter, and we're going to get. Oh, well, yeah. We're going to be getting some Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley submissions. Put it in the book now. That being said, gets Houston this coming week. Cincinnati kind of circling the drain right now. Obviously, no Joe Burrow. Their defense is pretty problematic generally. And then week 16 and week 17, like the Panthers are one of these games. The Panthers, Andy, the Bucks who were just shredded by CJ Stroud and Tank Dell. I don't know, man. I'm not ready to put Trevor. Like I'm willing to hold out hope that because they did truly approach some things differently in that game. I get obviously great matchup, but the Zay Jones stuff has been talked to death. We talked about it on the podcast last night with Scott, like why that does make a difference for this pass game. And look, Zay Jones has some legal issues he's facing. I'm not exactly sure how long he's going to be a part of the proceedings here.
Yeah.
So I think they did enough to sort of like, look, it shouldn't have taken till week 11 for Press Taylor to figure this whole thing out. But I'm willing to hold out hope that like we actually didn't just see the best and like the only sort of high end watermark we're going to get from this passing game. I'm kind of hoping that this is the start of something a little bit different here.
Yeah, I don't think it's the best game he's going to play. I just don't think that there's a better fantasy game out there. This is a thing that people who've listened to this pod, people who've read any of the work that we've produced over the last couple of years. I have been crying out for like more rushing opportunities for Trevor Lawrence. Because I swear to God, he can do this as well as Josh Allen. This could be his game. The first touchdown was just an exceptional the guy's playing through a knee injury too. Just exceptional scramble dive for the pylon. This could be every week. I get that they want to protect him. I'm sure that he receives constant guidance about the number of times that he puts himself at risk. They don't want it. I get it. But man, it would really unlock an incredible fantasy upside for Lawrence, who again, as a collegiate player, it was one of the best aspects of his game. He's really, really good at it. This could be. I don't want to go down that road too far because they're clearly not going to make it a big part of his game moving forward. If they did, it would be awesome. They won't. But I think this is probably going to be the best fantasy performance he has. And even in this, he only passed for 2 touchdowns. I hope we get a 3 touchdown game out there somewhere. I'm really looking forward to the Houston matchup. I mean, that's the whole division right there. That's super exciting. So perhaps this is a week premature, 2 weeks premature. But I just wanted to send him out on a high note.
Yeah, damn, that's tough. Like we've fought back against like Jaguars panic for weeks, and then they finally have their big breakout game, and Andy wants to put them in the coping corner.
Yeah,
that's pretty brutal. Let's read off our user submission here. This one comes in from Kyle P. And like I said, I'm not sure if we can just allow people out there to just submit players for the coping corner.
Wait, is this Kyle P, who himself is in the coping corner?
Correct. Yes. So Kyle writes in, "Hello, Matt and Andy. It is I, the infamous Kyle, who was tossed into the coping corner by the malicious Andy Behrens. I will try this again if you gentlemen would be so kind to nominate someone else. I think it's time to put Terry McLaurin into the coping corner, who I believe you guys have mentioned but not officially put into the coping corner. I know this must be tough for you to stomach, Harmon. He hasn't been terrible this year, but he also has only had one game over 20 fantasy points, full PPR, despite the insane passing volume from Sam Howell. It's tough for him to have a ceiling with how much they spread the ball around, I suppose. Also, shout out to you guys for motivating Tony Pollard to finally scoring another touchdown. He's clearly a fan of the show and wanted to prove you guys wrong. Perhaps this will work with future players you put into the coping corner. Best, the first, and so far only listener to be put in the coping corner. P.S. I think this is a great segment you guys have added into the show this year, and I love how you respond to fans, even idiots like me who nominate players who are already in the coping corner." All right, so yeah, obviously, little shout out to Kyle there for being self-aware. Appreciate it. Andy, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of with Kyle about putting if we did the whole Falcons, can we not put the entire Washington Commanders offense into the coping corner?
Okay, that's actually what I was going to say. We should, if McLaurin goes, Dotson's got to go, and if Dotson and McLaurin go, we should just shoo them all in there.
Right, because even like, well, Brian Robinson's finally bouncing back in fantasy. Well, congratulations, the offense stinks. And because he's catching Antonio Gibson's worthless PPR checkdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, FedEx Field showers. Producer Collins says also need to be in the coping corner. Like Eric Bieniemy, can he go in the coping corner? I hate this offense. There's no layups to good players. Okay. Like there's layups to the running backs and the tight ends and like Jamison Crowder, but like, can we get Terry McLaurin on a crossing route? Can we get John Dotson work in the middle of the field? It's crazy. I like I said, don't like this offense. Don't like the constant rotation. I mean, their depth chart yesterday was hilarious. I don't know. Yeah, it's like Eric Bieniemy doesn't realize he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes. Like he has Sam Howell and like a bunch of really talented pass catchers. So I don't love that. Like, I think they all got to go in the coping corner. I mean, even Brian Robinson, who like, again, congratulations. He's catching passes. So it's good for your fantasy team, and the offense is losing to Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito's out there doing like the Italian symbol when he's throwing touchdowns. Like what's going on here?
That, man, that last Howell interception, the pick six in particular, was just, I mean, that was just comedy, right? Like just what a wild season. Because I feel like in some ways, I was just discussing this with Fitz, like I feel like I'm going to end up technically right on Sam Howell as like a fantasy asset this year, but entirely for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
First of all, I would never have guessed. I don't even know where I would have put the odds of Sam Howell entering Thanksgiving week leading the NFL in passing yards. That was just not a consideration. Like that was the argument for Sam Howell was entirely about, oh man, he might run for 500 yards. He might rush for like 6-7 scores. He could sneak into the top 12. It's been it's a season that you would never want to like allow a young quarterback to watch a whole lot of Sam Howell. He hasn't been great, obviously, but here he is leading the NFL in passing yards, and somehow he's doing it without producing like startable is a little strong, but without even producing a particularly interesting wide receiver for fantasy purposes, right? Like it's
you're
300
left wanting by everybody in this passing game, which is
it's 300 plus yards basically to two running backs to Logan Thomas is like the number 2 leading receiver on the team. It's a whole bunch of guys with like 300 receiving yards. It's not terribly exciting. There's not, nobody's collecting touchdowns here. It's a big thorny mess. And yet somehow here we are with Sam Howell over 3,000 passing yards through 11 weeks of football.
Yeah. They're going to have like pretty similar end of season numbers, I think, from a fantasy perspective as to what they did last year, both Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. Like right now, Terry McLaurin is wide receiver 22. It feels like he finishes as wide receiver 22 every single year.
Yeah.
644 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like I bet you by the end of the year, he gets to 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns, which is basically like every Terry McLaurin season. Jahan Dotson right now, he has 63 targets. He's wide receiver 43. He's probably going to have a few blow up weeks where he gets to pretty similar stats to where he ended last season with, and he was injured for a bit last season. And basically you can take some of those zeros that he scored you this year and just pretend he was injured. And he's basically going to have the same season as he did last year, which is kind of like really why I want to put Washington and my dude, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, like why I want those guys in the coping corners, because like I'm kind of coping with like, this is just Terry McLaurin's career. Like he's never going to get and sometimes you get the, in these situations where like, man, this guy's such a good route runner and like, he's a really, really good player. If only he was on another offense. If only he was on another offense. You know, sometimes you get the Steph Diggs and like he gets into another offense and you see the results. Sometimes it's like they're just toiling away like Allen Robinson until they finally get to Matthew Stafford and they're both at the decrepit end of their career and it just doesn't happen. Like I think we're that's kind of where I feel like we're headed with Terry McLaurin and that makes me sad, which is why like I'm not going to allow in future weeks, making the decision right now. I'm not going to allow in future weeks for the listeners to submit to the coping corner. You submit to the panic meter. We decide if you're panicking or coping. That's the essence of the show. But I am going to use my submission this week to nominate the Washington passing game instead because Kyle sent it in here.
Yeah, I'm all for it. If we don't have to go around in circles about Jahan Dotson again, that would be awesome. It is really too bad to put McLaurin in this place, but
it hurts.
He's got to go there.
He's got to go there. It hurts. And look, if we're doing the reverse jinx and Sam Howell somehow lights up the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, I mean, I'll shotgun like 3 beers. Okay. Like I'll be so happy about it. I'll be so happy about it. Okay. So there is that. But man, this team finishes with the Jets, the 49ers, and the Cowboys again in weeks 16, 17, and 18. And they still have a bye week too. I mean, yeah, you're screwed. You're screwed if you have Washington players on your fantasy team. So they go into the coping corner. Last thing, by the way, and then we move on. Didn't we like all realize just a few years ago that like raw passing yards is not an indication of how good a quarterback is? Like it's like, Sam, how can you say he's not been that good this year? He's leading the NFL in passing yards. Please watch the games. Like I think he's proven to be.
I feel like the Jameis season should have ended that for everyone, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, then again, you still have people all these years. And look, I love Jameis for what he does for the receivers, but I mean, come on. Nobody wants to start Jameis Winston. And I think Sam Howell will probably be in, like, I think he can be a great Ryan Fitzpatrick facsimile, you know, and I think that's a good third, like day 3 draft pick. Okay. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, I think Washington will be starting completely from scratch next season. Quarterback, head coach, offensive coordinator, GM, front office, the whole thing. Like the future of Washington's football team is not its current iteration. So with that, we move the Washington Commanders offense into the coping corner to join Ramondre Stevenson, Christian Watson, Dameon Pierce, the Falcons offense, Tony Pollard. Love that we just have 2 complete teams on offenses in the coping corner.
They're the right teams.
That is absolutely beautiful. All right, let's get into the rest of the submissions here, starting with Joey M., who does want us to talk about Calvin Ridley. Just not even really panic, but I mean, hey, you're inciting some panic here, Andy, that we may never see any good performances from the Jags again. Let's hear what Joey had to say.
Matt, this Calvin Ridley character, he's probably going to win me a couple matchups this week. Love that. But can I honestly trust him over guys like Drake London next week?
All right, Andy. I will say I'm probably like, are we trusting him over Drake London next week? I would think the answer is probably yes. I mean, the Falcons. Who do the Falcons play?
They got the Saints.
The Falcons play the Saints. Meanwhile, the Jacksonville Jaguars, as we mentioned, they play the Houston Texans. That's a pretty big game. I think I'd probably trust Calvin Ridley, but like, I remember our discussion last week where, like, if I was just thinking as average fantasy player, like, I'm never like, I understand why Ridley has been so frustrating. Also, shout out to my brother-in-law. We got together on Saturday. I told you we were doing some betting on Big Ten football.
Yeah,
it's just great to hate yourself on a Saturday. And he was asking me who to start in his flex. And I was like, dude, I hate to tell you, like, I know you don't want me to tell you, but like, I kind of think the answer is Calvin Ridley. And he was just like, never, I'll never start this guy again. I'll never start him again. And I definitely did not see 2 touchdowns and 100 yards coming. So there is that. But yeah, like, speaking in that mindset, it's like, no, this guy has burned you so bad that the 100 yards and 2 touchdowns almost doesn't really possibly move the needle, as crazy as that sounds. So for the people that do think that way, Andy, Joey included, what do we think happens with Calvin Ridley going forward?
I am actually, by the way, tip of the cap to Joey here for sneaking in a sit-start question in the panic meter, which is not at all what this is about, but he did it, and we're talking about it. I think I'm going to have these two really close because under normal circumstances, you'd say, okay, well, the Saints defense is a daunting matchup, but Marshawn Lattimore picked up the ankle injury. Like, they're going to be without one of the best corners in the game, right? London, the fact that London returned from his injury ahead of the bye, really good sign that he's going to be like fully functional in this one. So it's going to be close. Neither team, in my view, has a stay away matchup. You don't like, we're not going to trust Calvin Ridley moving forward because all those dud games really did happen. And just as you look back on his season, it sure looks as simple as, man, you give him a good matchup and he can produce at least at some level. I'm probably going to have, I haven't ranked for the week yet, but I'm probably going to have Ridley a few ticks ahead. And that's not recency bias or anything. I just think they're going to be able to put up. I think they're going to be able to put up numbers. I am going to be. I don't know. I'm probably going to overreact to Ridley's matchup though, moving forward, and just sort of view him as a. I need to see the green light in terms of matchups before I actually trust him in any given week.
I did not think I'd be seeing comparisons on my Twitter timeline to Calvin Ridley and Gabe Davis at this point in my life. And as a pure player, I mean, obviously it couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, give me a break. But at the same time, again, you look at the game log and you're like, I get it. Yeah. I get it. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Andy H sends in this video about Cooper Kupp and Garrett Wilson.
Hey, gentlemen. Andy Hag. Huge fan of the show, avid watcher. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I will say I'm really concerned about Cooper Kupp. I don't know if it's coping corner time, but man, 3 weeks of 6 points and then injured this week. I just wonder if these 30-year-old receivers just can't make it the way that they could 3-4 years ago. And he's not getting the targets from Stafford that we're used to. And I'm concerned rest of the way for Kupp. And also Garrett Wilson. I'm rocking both those guys in my Dynasty League and uber concerned. Even I doubt Aaron Rodgers comes back because the Jets look like they're not going to win the rest of the year. And I'm really concerned, even Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, whoever at quarterback, that I don't think Garrett Wilson's going to be a guy that we can rely on every week.
Yeah, let's real quick on the Cooper Kupp thing. Yeah, I don't know, Andy. We are kind of close to coping corner with Cooper Kupp. Do you agree or disagree?
No, you have to agree. And now he walks away from this past weekend with an injury. He appeared to be in a fair amount of pain on the sideline too. Like, I don't want to make assumptions moving forward based on that. I know it's not supposed to be like a high ankle sprain or anything of that nature, but I don't know. Didn't look good. He has a beatable matchup coming up, and then they're another one of these teams that gets like the Browns and Ravens back to back, which is kind of a nightmare. So they've got 2 really, really rough spots coming up. With the Cardinals matchup ahead, so you just gotta hope that he makes it back for. You gotta hope he makes it back for Week 12 because you're not going to be terribly optimistic about the 2 weeks that follow.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. On the Garrett Wilson thing, it is crazy. Like, you look at the game logs again for Garrett Wilson, and if you for whatever reason could have predicted that he was going to be playing with Zach Wilson heading into the year. If you told me like he had a 9 for 60, 3 for 54, 8 for 90, 7 for 100, 7 for 80, 9 for 93. I mean, he's not scoring any damn touchdowns. The whole team isn't scoring touchdowns. How do you expect Garrett Wilson to score touchdowns when nobody's scoring touchdowns on this team? If you told me like, yeah, he has a stretch like that, I'd be like, okay, hell yeah, I'll take that. But you didn't expect the next one in that list of stats I read off to go 2 for 9 and a fumble, which gets to the extra points or the negative points. But look, this is what it looks like when your top receiver plays on an abhorrent, objectively bad, despicable offense. I mean, Andy, I'm looking at Tim Boyle's college stats. You know, if you haven't heard, Tim Boyle will be the starting quarterback on Black Friday.
You're not seeing a lot of starts there, are you?
No. Al Michaels is doing that game, right? The Thursday Night Crew is doing the Black Friday game, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to watch that. Can't wait to hear how can't wait to hear how that goes. Okay. His college stats, Tim Boyle, by the way, 48% completion rate, 1,200 yards, 1 touchdown, 13 interceptions. 1 for 13 is the ratio there. So that's not
It's
ideal.
not the ratio you're looking for. It's not ideal. It's slightly worse than his ratio in the NFL, which is like 3-9. Played on 4 teams over 5 years. It has not been a distinguished career for Tim Boyle. And this is just more an indictment of Zach Wilson's play and whatever attitude surrounding it must exist in the Jets locker room right now, right? Because there's no way you'd make a change to somebody who's obviously not a better option, right? Like nobody can make a serious case that Tim Boyle gives you perhaps a better chance to win. I mean, I don't know how you get there. Like there's no way this goes well.
No way this goes well. So yeah, we're in some justifiable panic about both of these players. I think you're right to be a little concerned going forward. Look, Garrett Wilson can have big games at any time because he's a great player in the prime of his career, but he can have 2 for 9 games at any time because the Jets are a joke. Like that is just well within the range of outcomes. All right. Will N sends in this submission. What's up, Yahoo crew? So this is admittedly a champagne panic or maybe a Minority Report future panic concern, but I'm worried about Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. It seems like no one else on the Chargers is stepping up, and pretty soon Keenan's going to get the Garrett Wilson treatment of blanket coverages. Am I overreacting? Love your work, Will. Plenty of people also wanted to talk about Quentin Johnston panicking from a dynasty perspective, and yeah, you should go ahead and panic about that one. But yeah, so I don't know, state of the Chargers, Andy, how concerned are you about this offense?
Well, I mean, you've named like 2 of the only pieces that I don't think we should be super worried about. I don't think Keenan Allen's going to disappear. If there was an easy way to take Keenan Allen away, teams would have done it at some point over the last decade. I don't think we have to. I don't think we have to panic about that. He's not coming off his finest game, right? Dropped a touchdown. It was a little bit ugly. Herbert, for the most part, played well enough to overcome it. That's a recurring story as well. I don't know. If you want to worry about Keenan Allen, worry about age and worry about the possibility of injury. But I think he's going to be fine moving forward. You've already kind of turned a profit on Keenan Allen because you could find plenty of people who didn't really want anything to do with him coming into the season. He's had an excellent year. So I'm not panicked there. But as for the Chargers generally, like, I don't know, everybody heard Staley after the game have an edge to him that he doesn't normally have. I mean, it's pretty clear the way this is going to go down over the balance of the season, and he's on like the hottest seat in the NFL right now. I don't know, maybe Coach Eberflus is close to it, but it's like it's those two in some order. So it's not great, but of all the things to panic about here, I would be the least panicked about Austin and about Keenan and Herbert.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about just everybody on the Chargers, but obviously with Keenan, it's like the guy dropped 2 would-be touchdown passes last game and still came away with an awesome like fantasy performance, So I think the margin for error for him is really, really wide. I'm not that concerned about Keenan. I mean, he's also in a great position too, and I talk about this a lot. It's one thing to bracket Garrett Wilson and kind of double cover and blanket Garrett Wilson because, Everybody else is a non-factor, and he's the primary outside receiver. And they do some decent things with moving him around. He's not just like a standalone X, but Keenan Allen as that slot receiver. And it does not matter who else they throw out there, like Quentin Johnston, Stone Smart, any of these guys. Like they're not going to be able to blanket and like double cover Keenan Allen because he's that slot receiver, and they're going to do so much to give him free releases and two-way goes and all this type of stuff. So I actually think he's pretty insulated from sort of the concerns that you have here, Will. I don't think there's any real reason to be concerned about Keenan, but I think concern about basically anything else with the Chargers is warranted at this point. Like, it's a matter of when, not if, that like Brandon Staley gets fired and this team blows it up. And they're in so much like cap hell next year because they really did push a lot in to retain this core of players and make a push with this group of guys, and a lot of changes coming to that organization.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Again, I don't know. Allen is probably the least of my worries, and I've got him on a handful of teams, and I can't believe that you even put it out there into the world that there could be any sort of fall off, because he's carrying the teams on which I have him.
Yeah, certainly. You were right to call this champagne panic, Will.
Yeah.
It's something that you can like, oh no, this is a little concerning, but you're like, nah, it's good. It's gonna be fine.
By the way, I would for sure panic about Johnson in Dynasty if you thought that was a serious asset. This is not going well. And
if this was a Dynasty podcast, he would have been in the coping corner like 3 weeks ago.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So it's not, but 100%. Like, yeah. And nobody's gonna. And the worst part about it is that, like, not only has he been, just a complete net negative for the offense, he's had highlight reel embarrassing moments where like your entire league, who is not probably tracking Quentin Johnston like you did if you unfortunately took him in your rookie draft, like they know how bad he's been by the low lights, because the low lights are representative of everything else going on. Like, I love the people who I was like, oh, well, he's getting open, he's just dropping the ball. Okay, sure. Sure. Yeah, it's like 10 alarm fire panic about Quentin Johnston. Definitely from a dynasty perspective. He can turn it around. I don't know. People, you can say this until you've like dug your own grave. He's only 9 games. It's only 10 games. It's many games. Like, you just keep and digging. But there's no positive things to say right now.
No, absolutely not. I agree.
All right, let's move on to the social media submissions here, starting with @Leathernut, who tweeted directly at you, Andy. At Andy Behrens. Hurts to ask, but Diggs in the hashtag coping corner, asking with in the fourth quarter with quarter 4 to go, on the hope that this tweet does not age well, but 4 points after last week's 4.9. Woof. You alerted me to this tweet, Andy, to go to be aware of this. Yeah, Steph Diggs is not in the coping corner because he hasn't even been in the panic meter.
No, he hasn't made an appearance in the panic meter. We don't skip steps here.
We do not skip steps. We are a country, a nation, a podcast of process. All right. So let's be clear about that. Steph Diggs is not in the coping corner. He's not even near the coping corner. Again, I'm just looking at the game logs, and there is no reason to panic except for the fact that there is a 27-yard game and a 34-yard game staring you right in the face, back to back. And they came in pretty big moments, obviously, with the Denver Broncos game on Monday Night Football. Yeah. And then, like, everybody was, by the end of that game, because the 4 o'clock window was so messy and this was the last game to kick off, everybody was watching that Jets-Bills game as, like, Ty Johnson's catching passes out of the backfield and Steph Diggs is doing nothing. So, Andy, any reason to panic about Stefon Diggs?
No, Steph Diggs is an almost singularly talented player. He's a receiver that, like, they don't, we don't, again, we've talked about it before. We don't get the Cooper Kupp season very often where somebody is just week in and week out a wide receiver one. There is some variance to this. He did have to deal with Surtain a couple weeks ago. There's really no place the Jets corners didn't exactly play their best game this past weekend, but there's no place to hide against those corners. Reed and Gardner are very good. So faced a couple of difficult secondaries. The team has undergone a little bit of upheaval in the last 2 weeks as well. I'm not particularly panicked here. I'm going to continue to rank Steph Diggs as a top 10, top 8, top 6 fantasy receiver. Rest of season is just hard not to.
Yeah, very hard not to. I will remind the people out there that there was a 3-game stretch for Stefon Diggs last year where he went 3 for 37, 5 for 60, and 2 for 26. These were magnified also because one of them was against the Jets. By the way, tough matchup, pretty tough defense there with those perimeter cornerbacks. It was a game against the Dolphins, another division game, and then 2 for 26 against your Bears when they beat the hell out of them 35-13, much like they beat. There was 2 things working against Diggs last week where bad matchup, perimeter corners that are really good, and they beat the hell out of the Jets. They didn't need too much out of Steph Diggs, but they get the Eagles next week. I mean, it's a really tough schedule down the stretch for the Buffalo Bills. Like, there are going to be multiple moments where they need Stefon Diggs. Eagles this week, Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers, New England, Miami. Tough matchups there. A few of them tough matchups that they will need Stefon Diggs. So I do not think we are even close to, much less coping corner, but really even panic with Stefon Diggs. Like, these things are going to happen.
Yeah, that's a tough real life schedule for the Bills, but that's especially the matchup ahead against the Eagles. The Eagles have allowed, again, as we speak, the Chiefs game hasn't happened yet, but the Eagles right now allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers. They've been super generous to quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight. Like, it's just not been a great pass defense. It was bad in week 1 against Mac Jones. It was, it's been bad against Dak. It's been bad against Sam Howell. Like, we talked about it on Fantasy Football Live. Sam Howell is 700 passing yards against the Eagles this year. They have not been good. So it should be something more than a get right spot for Diggs.
Next one up here at BJOXYZPDQ. That's their Twitter handle. Sends in Cincinnati. Though I just watched Jake Browning and he didn't seem that bad. Obviously, it is the year of this quarterback is bad, but how bad is he? Because we have seen so many interesting quarterback start games for the NFL this season. So Cincinnati, obviously, they're playing without Joe Burrow. Like, we haven't really had a discussion about this on the podcast because of the timing of the injury. It was announced on a late Friday. So, Andy, what is the expectation now for the Cincinnati Bengals now that Joe Burrow is not a part of the, I don't know. I kind of hate these questions, and I'm the one asking you the question, Andy, but I hate these questions because it's they're screwed. What do you want me to say?
I know that's kind of I'm trying to find a way to dress that up a little bit, but that is kind of how I feel. The trajectory of the team, obviously not great. It's a huge step down from Burrow to Browning, who might, he's probably not the worst quarterback starting games in the NFL right now. I'll give him that. Relatively speaking, there are, I mean, shoot, we're 15 minutes ago, we were talking about Tim Boyle starting a game, right? So he's not the worst NFL starter currently, but it ain't good. It's not Joe Burrow. I don't know what percentage to put on it for you. I think Jamar Chase is still a great player and they'll probably feed him. The thing that you can hope for is that Browning does the bad quarterback thing and he just locks in on his best receiver and is like, oh, you're getting 15 targets. This is the thing that works. But I don't feel good about anybody else attached to the offense. Sometimes there's a conversation about, oh man, maybe they'll rely on the running game. Maybe this is good for Mixon. It's never good for anybody tied to the offense when the quarterback is bad. So it's not good for Mixon. It's not good for anyone.
No, not good for anyone. And I mean, just Jamar Chase probably in the Garrett Wilson zone of sure, he can have an 8 for 80 game, and you're like, man, thank God he had an 8 for 80 game, but then he could have a 2 for 9 game. Just these guys can't get the ball to themselves.
Yeah.
Period. I do think I wouldn't say the Bengals coaching staff and the way they approach offense is my favorite. I think they get maybe too much criticism sometimes, but I certainly think they're better than Nate Hackett. So there is that. If I'm comparing to Garrett Wilson, I think they're better than Nate Hackett there over in Cincinnati. Low bar.
Very low bar. Yeah.
Very low bar. All right. I want to move on to this one from @Lieberman Roy. Says Marquise Brown. I traded Tank Dell for Marquise Brown the week before Kyler came back. I know Brown has gotten unlucky. Yeah. I know.
That made me cringe.
Sorry, we're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you in misery. Okay, because we've all done this. It's happened to everybody. It's not your fault, Lieberman Roy. It's not your fault. What's that movie?
Good Will Hunting. Yeah.
Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Duh. I mean, my God, brain is so fried. I can't even begin to speak about it. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, kid. It's not your fault. I know Brown has gotten unlucky and the numbers should look better, but I don't see a world where I win that trade. Well, you're correct. I don't think you're going to win that trade.
Yeah. So this is one of the names where I kind of sort of understand the panic. And I should take a longer view here and recognize that Brown is a very good player and Kyler Murray is a very good quarterback, and it's going to be fine. Like, I'm sure it's going to be fine. This is just not, the expectation as soon as Murray came back was like, oh, wow, well, Brown has been able to tread water this year. He's been okay. He's seen a bunch of double-digit target games. This has been fine. And now he's really going to pop, and that clearly has not happened. It's like, 4 targets, then 5 targets. I mean, he has 3 catches in 2 games now with Kyler, which is not everything you'd wanted. He did have a couple weeks ago, had a near miss on what would have been a long touchdown. It was like, ball was maybe a little bit overthrown. He did get both hands on it. It would have been one of the catches of the week. Whatever, it didn't happen. So he's been close, but it's the volume here that is a little bit worrisome. Obviously, Trey McBride has been great. Other guys have been great. We just had a random Greg Dortch game. So I'm sure that this will come around to Brown. But I personally would I have done the Brown Dell trade? I don't know. I feel for you though, because I understood the case for Brown, and I think he's a really good player. I have found the workload to be lacking, and I am a little bit concerned. I've got him in a couple leagues where I was super optimistic, and I passed on the opportunity to make some trades because I was like, oh man, Hollywood Brown's about to go off, and that is not happening. I have a low level of worry here.
I'm with you that I had like a trade on the table in the Eckler League that might have actually saved my season, just because it would have at least gotten me 1 win. Like, sometimes it'll save your season if you just get 1 win. Like, I could have traded, I think with Lindsey Rhodes, I could have traded Marquise Brown for Kyler Murray on the week that Jalen Hurts was my quarterback was on bye. Like, so I probably would have won that week because I wouldn't have had to start Taylor freaking Heineke off waivers, when I didn't get Josh Dobbs. So, but in my mind, I was like, Marquise Brown's about to get really rolling here.
Right.
Now, and there's some gettable matchups here. Rams, Steelers, your Bears, Eagles. Like, there's some spots down the stretch where like Marquise Brown can absolutely pop off. I do think there's a couple things working against him here. Like you mentioned, there was a note because I was watching that game on one of my solo TVs here. There was a note from the broadcast crew where the coaching staff and Kyler Murray have been encouraging Trey McBride to like improvise on his routes in like a Travis Kelce type of way, which a lot of faith in Trey McBride. Yeah. I think that goes to show you how they view where he is as a player. So that is really encouraging for your Trey McBride bags. But I think it goes to show that like when you're looking at short and intermediate, he's the first read there. He's the guy they want to get the ball to. And then they have these kind of gadgety guys like Rondale Moore. I know he caught a big downfield pass, but like him and Greg Dortch, like a little short area slot receiver. Even Michael Wilson has been more of like a in-breaking route Michael Pittman type of receiver than a vertical X. So that leaves Marquise Brown as the lone downfield guy who is going to be very hit and miss with that usage. Like, he had a 17-yard average depth of target. Like, when he hits, he's going to hit big. Like, he can hit big in any of those games I just mentioned. He's going to have big moments. But I do think there was a sort of like, okay, he's going to be a wide receiver 1 now with Kyler. He's never been that guy. Like, I think Marquise Brown's a really good player, but he's not that guy. Like, there's a reason that we were craving a number 1 receiver all those years in Baltimore, even though he was putting up good numbers. It's because he's like a good player, not a great player. Yep. Lastly, Andy, you mentioned the word optimistic. I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm like the rosiest person in the world, but I do try to like see how things can work out in a positive direction from a football perspective. I don't know where you stand on your rosiness scale, but like, this is a great situation where 2 weeks into it, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, Kyler Murray's been a little rusty as a passer. I mean, no shit, Kyler Murray's been rusty as a passer. Like, Calvin Ridley's been rusty beating press coverage. Well, no shit, been rusty beating press coverage. He didn't play football in a while. Like, how do we slow ourselves down from like projecting too much optimism in these type of situations? Do, I think collectively all want to see the best things for players, but how do we keep ourselves grounded and being like, yeah, you know what? He's not going to play great from a downfield passing perspective. He's going to miss deep shots to Marquise Brown because he hasn't thrown a football like in a live game for a long time.
Yeah, the funny thing is, and I've been thinking about this a lot with Calvin Ridley, like it really only took like 1 or 2 preseason highlights for us to be like, oh, he's caught up. He's fine now.
Yeah.
It's over. Like that's not how like rust works after a layoff, right? That's not how you can have isolated flashes, right? It's a question of whether you can do it consistently, play in and play out. And that was a little rough for Ridley at first. It makes all the sense in the world that Kyler isn't exactly peak Kyler. I think with Murray, it's actually been if anything threw you off, it was the fact that he returned to the field looking as a runner, just like wow plays. First game back, virtually the same mobility that you remember. And so once you saw that, like that was the piece that I was most concerned about. And so you just sort of disregard any thought about what he's going to look like as a passer because, oh my God, the ground game is back. The rushing stats are back. This is amazing. But yeah, it's gonna take a little time.
Yeah, it's going to take time. Like that is something to remember going forward. Like these things take time. It's just like real football speed, like real games are just so different than anything else.
And it's not all better just because you see like a single highlight that looks like the normal player. Yeah.
Like, oh God, if anybody should know that, it should be me. But I do get caught up in like, how can things work out? Like, okay, I don't even really like this receiver that much, but like, what role would he fit into best? And sometimes like, yeah, you know what? This is not going to work. Okay. Like sometimes sometimes things don't work. More often than not, things don't work. Like this is it's select league that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Most people don't make it and it's just difficult. It is what it is. Okay. I want to get to two more before we get to the waiver wire pickups, especially this one from X Chain Banger X. What a name. All early season, I was salivating about Derrick Henry's 2 playoff games against the Texans, but what if the Titans can't keep up and Henry gets schemed out? It's been a slog for Derrick Henry lately, Andy, and I'll admit, I thought about Derrick Henry in the coping corner. Like he's somebody we might consider next week, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, it's fair. I can't really argue with it. Like it wasn't that long ago that Derrick Henry was at least delivering, 100 total yards or close to it pretty reliably. These last couple of weeks, not ideal. This feels a little bit like the Tony Pollard conversation from a couple of weeks ago, because he does have matchups coming up where like it's got to happen here. If it doesn't happen here, when is it going to happen? He's got Carolina on deck. Like that is literally the game that got Tony Pollard right-ish. So if it can't happen in this one. Obviously I think he's more exposed to game script than he ever has because he's not on the field for every snap anymore. Tajay Spears out there all the time. He's a really good receiver. So there are probably going to be some spots where it just, you can't feed Derrick Henry as much as they want to. You look at the part of this question that gets me a little bit is the idea, and we've talked about it before, like, don't spend a lot of time when you're 2 months out. Like when it's October, don't salivate over December because you don't have any idea what defenses are going to be good in December. Like that is a story that repeats every year. Most defenses are like 1 or 2 injuries away from being, super friendly matchups, no matter how good they look, at one point in the year. So I don't know. The longer I play this game, the less interested I get in long look aheads, because that stuff just never, ever works out. But like, I don't know, we're getting close to December and it doesn't look like a terrible schedule. But the problem for the Titans is they can fall behind by 3 scores to anybody, like in a blink. That basically happened against Jacksonville. And then it's really, then it's a problem for Derrick Henry. It is really, really tough sledding. So you look at those Houston matchups now, and what are the odds that, I don't know, what are the odds that those games are going to be close? It might happen, but I don't think I'd bet on it the way that Stroud and Dell and Collins are playing.
Right, yeah, and the defense too. Like D'Amico Ryans has been incredible with that side. I mean, just incredible for the culture in general, but with that side of the ball particularly. So yeah, the crux of it being like, oh man, 2 games against the Texans. There was a lot of ways that you could have fallen through the trapdoor on that one. But
yeah,
let me tell you what, if you're panicking about Derrick Henry, you know what? He's on Pollard's playground watch just because, if he doesn't go out and smash the Panthers this weekend, we panic when we put him in the coping corner. I'm almost kind of writing that in pen right now. So although I bet we get a packed people's panic meter next week because of all of the like standalone games that we have coming up here. So.
Oh, you're right. It usually is the primetime games and the standalones that produce a lot of questions.
All right, Andy, last one. And this player will be on a standalone game, so we'll see. Gotta ask you this. At Jack, bunch of numbers.
Knew it.
Tweeted at us just separately. Love this. These are the real ones, okay? When you're just tweeting at us separately, and not in the submissions. I know you are really listening to the pod and you're really keeping up. So shout out to you, Jack. And I'm saying all these nice things because I know Andy might be mean to you here. Jack, bunch of numbers, sends in, I'm starting to panic about a certain tight end who plays for a pro team in Michigan with a sad face stuck at the end. Yes, Sam LaPorta's recent performances, Andy, are making people sad. I would not be a good co-host if I didn't give you an opportunity to sound off on some of these Sam LaPorta panic.
Yeah, I'm not going to be enraged in the same way that I was about Lamar Jackson questions a couple weeks ago. I get it. Like, he's coming off 3 catches, 18 yards, a 2-point conversion, right? The thing that I will say about the Bears game is that, first of all, it ended the way all Bears games do. That was amazing. It's incredible that the Bears are trapped in this particular cycle. It's wild. Also, Jared Goff was just, and it's never all one player. Even when you think one player is playing disastrously, it's a team game. I get all that. But man, Jared Goff was bad for 3 quarters. The picks were ugly. The Bears really muddied the middle of the field. And there was a ball that was intended early for LaPorta that got picked off. That was not a good throw. And then later in the game, LaPorta wide ass open, like ocean of green around him. And Goff sailed to throw to him. So sometimes it's just missed opportunities. But there was a path for him to finish with like 50 yards in this thing. It just didn't happen. And then the prior game, a weird one. Not necessarily a ton of targets. I think he finished with 40 yards. Had literally the key reception of the game on that 4th down at the end. I'm not particularly worried. You've obviously profited. He was like your 12th round, 13th round, 14th round pick, and you've got a top 5 tight end out of it. I will say the worst thing you can do is to start, whatever. If you somehow scooped Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, you wanted to give one of those guys a test drive, I'm willing to look the other way. But you can't fall into the trap at tight end where you just chase touchdowns, which is what we tend to do, right? Like I bet you're looking at Isaiah Likely right now and you're thinking, oh man, is that guy just going to have the Mark Andrews role as if Mark Andrews is a role? That's not something I do. There's like 5 tight ends where I think you could reasonably say, okay, I might start them over LaPorta in a given week, but the workloads by and large have been so bankable for LaPorta. His worst games, he's still seeing 5 or 6 chances. Tight ends like that, you have to roll out there.
Yeah, I'm looking back at it. Somebody actually responded to this thread that we were on with Jack. Tony Elliott at T12 Elliott. No surprise, his location is Grand Rapids, Michigan. No surprise. He says, I picked LaPorta in the 13th round and he's been a revelation. Buck up and realize he's still a top 5 tight end as a rookie. Yeah. All right, a little harsh, Tony. A little harsh. But yeah, he's still top 5 tight end. I do think there's been some guys that have stepped up, right? Like we talked about Trey McBride, David Njoku's been getting a lot of volume lately. Dalton Schultz, nobody wants to talk about it, but Dalton Schultz has been a really good pick at tight end. Dalton Kincaid, obviously, there was a moment where it looked like LaPorta was going to just clear those guys by a huge country mile. That's probably not the case, but I think Sam LaPorta should not be one of your problems in fantasy right now. I think he probably is a part of your solution.
Good. I'm glad to have you on board. Glad to have you on the Iowa bandwagon.
Oh yeah. I told you I watched the end of that Iowa game on Saturday. What an experience. I actually said because all the guys they listened to the podcast and I was like, oh yeah, Andy Behrens, big Iowa guy. They're like, why?
Matt, the touchdowns mean so much more within the context of an Iowa game. I can't tell you how thrilling it is when somebody actually finds the end zone. And there's only you've got basically a 33% chance that an offensive play. If you told me there's going to be a single touchdown in an Iowa game, only a 33% chance that an offensive player is scoring that touchdown, equal chance that every phase is going to be involved. It's absolutely thrilling. It's like the drama of watching a soccer match more so than traditional college football.
Horrible, and you did not sell the experience. Yeah, I'll know just the why. I mean, I guess I could have explained a little bit better than, yeah, he's a big Iowa guy. Like, just why? That's the reaction.
It's fair. We're going to get 10 wins out of this. It's amazing.
It's certainly beautiful. It is certainly a beautiful brand of football. Very singular in terms of its particular brand of football. All right. On that note, no more Iowa talk, more waivers. Andy, give us the top 5 players to pick up heading into week 12.
I'm going to give you an honorable mention first of all, because he barely misses my my cutoff. My cutoff for this is usually like 15% rostered or 50% rostered. Excuse me. Josh Downs is sitting right there, and I get it. Bye week. Josh Downs should be well out of this conversation. He should not be 50% rostered. He should be something like 80, 85% rostered. It should only be the smallest leagues where he is not on someone's team. He's great. They're gonna feed him. He's proven that he's so much more than like a near the line of scrimmage little slot receiver. I mean, he's great. If he's available in your league right now, you should go get him. I realize that doesn't apply to most of you, but if it applies to any of you, you should just go take a look for Josh Downs. He's excellent. My official number 5 here is going to be Zeke Elliott. He's coming off a 15 touch game I realize it's okay. It's 2023 and here we are talking about Zeke Elliott. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'll start with his matchups ahead, actually. He's got the Giants, and he's got the Chargers, the Steelers, the Chiefs, Denver. Those are a bunch of friendly spots for running backs. I cannot imagine, given the state of the quarterback position in New England right now, that they don't just lean on the run game moving forward, which is going to mean a lot of run for Stevenson, a ton for Zeke Elliott as well. His last game, he sees 15 touches, he gains 88 yards. He's still this is not vintage Zeke Elliott. Nobody's trying to make that case, but he's still a productive player who's going to fall into a bunch of work, and that's going to matter as we get into the final bye weeks. My number 4, let's just keep it with the olds. It's going to be Odell Beckham. He's got the Chargers coming up, a great matchup. Then he's got a bye. Then he's got the Rams. He's got Jacksonville. He's coming off a game with 116 yards, and I thought he looked. That was as spry as he has looked since his time with the Rams. I thought he looked really elusive. A couple of big gains in that one. I think that the Mark Andrews injury does not result in like 7-8 targets a game just flowing directly to Isaiah Likely. I think it gets distributed among the entire receiving core. I think Beckham is a part of that. Rashad Bateman is a part of that. Likely is a part of it. But I think Beckham is definitely going to benefit there. I know he walked away with a shoulder injury on Thursday night. It didn't seem unusually serious, and he did all the post-game interviews, which, if a player was in terrible pain, I don't think you would have seen that. So I think he plays moving forward, and I think he's fine. My number 3, and I almost made it my number 1, is going to be Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed, again, we said this going into week 11, and now we're saying it coming out of week 11. He leads the Packers in receiving yards. Like whatever numbers you thought you were going to get out of Christian Watson this season, you are actually getting out of Jayden Reed. Another touchdown for him on Sunday. He's got 5 for the year. Gained 92 yards on 7 touches. They gave him 3. They gave him 3 carries. That was kind of fun. 46 yards either way. He was really good. He gets Detroit on Thanksgiving. That is a beatable pass defense. Then he's got Kansas City, he's got the Giants, he's got Tampa, he's got Carolina. So there are some really fun spots there. My number 2 is Zach Charbonnet. And the only reason he's not my number 1 is that his matchups ahead are about as tough as you can get. It's San Francisco, then it's Dallas, then it's the Niners again, then it's Philly, and that's just a gauntlet. That's just terrible. But he's stepping into probably a huge workload because Kenneth Walker hurt an oblique on Sunday. Pete Carroll, I believe in post-game comments, called it a legit oblique injury. I don't know how many illegitimate oblique injuries there are out there.
As opposed to those phony ones.
Yeah, exactly. But Carroll seemed concerned about it. Charbonnet was already out-snapping Walker is the thing, right? He was playing 55% of the snaps. He's been the guy in hurry-up situations. He's often the guy on third down. Handled 21 touches against the Rams, and he entered the week super efficient. So I think Charbonnet is interesting. My number 1 is going to be Ty Chandler. A week after handling 15 carries, scoring a touchdown, gaining 45 yards, he turned 14 touches into 110 yards against Denver. A bit of a revelation of a game. He's he clearly has the Cam Akers workload. There is a path for him to get even more work. And that involves Alexander Mattison continuing to be Alexander Mattison. He hasn't been particularly efficient this year. He's had some ball security issues. I think there's a real chance that this could become, I don't know, right now it's probably 65-35. I think we can get to 55-45, maybe 50-50. That seems like a possibility. Chandler is explosive. He's got 4.3 wheels, and you can see it in game action. He's got the Bears coming up. That's about as friendly as it gets.
Yeah, it really unfortunate for the Zach Charbonnet managers that like you did the right thing. You held him. You like oh, he's gonna play in the 2-minute drill. He's gonna get to passing on work, but Kenneth Walker could get hurt. And I'm gonna moonwalk right into a starting running back, and you got all that, but then it's San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia. I mean, as bad as it could get. And last thing, Andy, on Jayden Reed, funny Treviso Babes story for you. We haven't talked about the Treviso Babes much this year. My mom's fantasy football league. We'll end the podcast with this story, but my mom has graduated now to playing in 2 fantasy leagues. It's been a hell of an experience. It's been a hell of an experience for me personally. I'll tell you that, buddy. Anyway, so she, she comes over on Sunday to help my wife and I out with some stuff. And she, wants me to look at her fantasy football team, like just, hey, right before kickoff, basically, literally like 10 minutes. She comes screaming in the door. We got 10 minutes till kickoff. I'm looking at her damn team. Like you need a lot of work here. She had asked me previously on the car ride over, her friend Jess, who's in the Treviso Babes League, wanted to know, I think it was Jerry Jeudy or Jayden Reed who to start. And I was like, oh, my guy, Jayden Reed. Come on, Jess, are you listening to the podcast? Please, you starting Jayden Reed. Let's go. So she did, and he's going off. And then my mom looks at her other fantasy team. Jayden Reed's on her bench. And look, my mom and I are on great terms. We've always been very close. She's had to yell at me a few times over the years for some malfeasances. This was definitely one of the worst. This was one of I got it bad on Sunday for my mom for telling her friend to start Jayden Reed, but not telling her to start Jayden Reed ahead of Marquise Brown. So you know what? I blame it to, again, scrambled brain. I'm trying to help Jess out. I'm trying to help her out. I'm juggling a lot. She's got 2 teams I got to take a look at. It's a lot going on there, but yeah, unfortunately, I helped out one Treviso babe, but not the Treviso babe, my mother.
I might have got that one wrong. I think if someone asked me Hollywood Jayden Reed before that game, I think I would have whiffed on that one. I would have been like, there's no way that Marquise Brown has 2 bad games in a row with Kyler Murray, and sure enough.
Oh, there was a way, which is a valuable fantasy football lesson to learn. When you say there's no way or it can't possibly get any worse, there's a way, and it can always get worse. Yeah, we're on the Babes' radar, Andy, because we don't talk about them anymore on the podcast. But hey, I mean, we've got to give them a little love there. They're our biggest fans. They're like, why don't they talk about us anymore? It's like, well, interesting stuff like this. I got to screw something else up, I guess, to get them on the show.
Do we know who's leading the league?
I don't off the top of my head. Actually, I really don't. So that's on me for being checked out.
Do we know if Mom is in playoff position?
No, her team stinks.
Scandal.
She's got a lot of problems with G Davis. Let me tell you that.
Okay, well, I know that you didn't get her into the G Davis situation.
There's a few. I mean, she's got G Davis, C Watson. I'm like, whose rankings were you looking at, Mom?
Yeah, she went rogue there. That's not on Harmon. No way.
No, it's not on me. I mean, did she start Deontay Johnson the flex the last 2 weeks? So you know what? Nobody's perfect. On that note, that's going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow, we have a special episode for the holiday weekend. It's a hybrid Stat Nerd Viewer's Guide. Thursday, Wednesday, whatever day it is, with Dalton Del Don. We're going to preview the Thanksgiving and Black Friday slate, as well as all the big games on Sunday that everyone plays there for Week 12. Andy, shout out to you. Appreciate you, buddy. Happy Thanksgiving. Well, I'll see you for FFL.
Wednesday night. Yeah.
Wednesday night. Yeah. FFL is on Wednesday night this week, by the way, people. And if you don't normally watch, you should definitely watch this episode because we are hosting a Thanksgiving happy hour at our house, which I did not realize I double booked. So we'll see what kind of state I am in on this Thursday night or Wednesday night. We'll see what state I'm going to be on FFL. So definitely tune in for that. And obviously tune in for all the great things that Andy and Fitz have to say. So again, Stat Nerd Viewer's Guide combination tomorrow with Dalton Del Don. It's going to be awesome. Until then, we're out.